The sun dipped behind the dense canopy of the elderwood, casting long shadows over Lurian village. Smoke curled gently from moss-covered chimneys, and laughter echoed from the square, where young women twirled in their freshly sewn dresses, rehearsing the moon festival dances. Illyra stood alone at the edge of the clearing, her left leg dragging slightly as she stepped forward. Each uneven stride pressed into the soft earth like a reminder of difference, of exclusion. The girls noticed, as they always did, whispers fluttered like crows. She's limping again. Like she always does. Who would ever dance with her? Illyra pretended not to hear, tightening her grip on the satchel slung across her shoulder. Inside were herbs she'd foraged from the forest, mugwort, wolfsbane and moonseed, gathered for old Scylla the healer. The forest didn't mock her. It never had. "Keep your head down," Scylla once told her. "Let them laugh. They'll choke on their pride one day." But some days even the forest couldn't shelter her from the sting of their laughter. In the village square, preparations for the moon festival buzzed like a hive. Lanterns shaped like crescent moons swayed in the breeze. Wooden stalls lined with fresh bread, wild honey, and roasted nuts formed a makeshift market. Elders told stories by the well, their voices weaving myths of wolves that turned into men under the silver gaze of the moon. It was the most sacred night of the year, the lunar convergence. Every 10 years, the Alpha King visited a chosen village to celebrate, and this year, Lurian had been chosen. The announcement came 3 days prior, delivered by royal envoys on black horses. Banners bearing the silver crest of the lupine throne now fluttered above the main hall. Panic and excitement swept through the village like wildfire. Every maiden of age would attend the moon dance. One might even be chosen to join the court or become the king's mate. Illyra wasn't foolish enough to believe she had a chance. Still, that night, as the fireflies danced like stars and the air smelled of pine and fate, something stirred in her chest. A whisper. A question. What if? Later, inside Scylla's cottage, the healer moved with surprising grace for her age. She sorted Illyra's herbs, nodding approvingly. "You've a good hand for the forest," Scylla said. "Your mother would have been proud." Illyra looked down. "I don't remember her." "She was strong, quiet like you, and brave." The old woman paused, watching her with sharp eyes. "Are you going to the festival?" "To be laughed at," Illyra scoffed. "I'd rather stay in the woods." "Then they win." Illyra didn't answer. Outside, drums began to beat, slow, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something ancient. A call, a warning, a promise. Scylla stepped closer. "The Alpha King will see through the noise. He always does." Illyra shook her head. "He'll see a cripple." "No," Scylla said firmly. "He'll see a wolf hiding in plain sight." Her words settled like embers in Illyra's soul. For the first time in years, she didn't brush them off. As Illyra stepped outside, the moon crested the treetops, casting silver over her worn boots. The drums grew louder. Her limp was still there, but so was the fire in her chest. And somewhere in the distance, a howl broke the silence, raw and low. Something was coming. If you believe that even the most broken steps can lead to something extraordinary, don't forget to subscribe and follow Illyra's journey. The story is just beginning. The morning air in Lurian village was thick with the scent of dye pots and fresh linen. Every cottage bustled with movement. Mothers shouted, daughters giggled, and spinning wheels hummed like bees. The moon festival was only days away, and the competition to be noticed by the Alpha King had turned the village into a nest of silks, scissors, and whispers. Illyra sat cross-legged on the floor of Scylla's hut, threading a bone needle through a patch of deep indigo fabric. Her fingers moved with care, though the cloth trembled with every tug. "You'll tear it if you keep clenching your jaw like that," Scylla warned, not looking up from the herb jars she was sorting. "I'm fine," Illyra murmured. The truth was she wasn't. Each stitch reminded her of how much she didn't belong to this ritual. She didn't have a mother to guide her hands, nor sisters to giggle beside. Just a threadbare needle, a borrowed piece of cloth, and a dream she hadn't dared admit out loud. "You're making it for the dance, then?" Scylla asked casually. "I'm making it because I'm tired of looking like I belong in the ashes." The old woman smiled faintly. Even wolves wear dresses, child. Doesn't mean they've forgotten how to bite. Outside, laughter rang out. Elira flinched. "Are you deaf, Elira?" Dana's voice cut sharp through the doorway. "Or do you think rags and herbs will charm a king?" Elira didn't rise. She didn't look. She focused on her stitch. Dana swept into the room without invitation. Her dress shimmered with delicate embroidery, golden thread tracing crescent moons and starflowers across pale blue silk. Two other girls followed her, smirking. Is that what you're making?" One sneered, peering at the modest garment on Elira's lap. "It looks like something the pigs would wear to market." Elira's eyes flicked up, calm and unbothered. Better than hiding claws behind perfume. Dana's smile vanished for a breath before returning sharper. "Claws? You? Sweet girl, you limp like a broken deer." "No one fears a deer," Scylla cleared her throat, "unless it survives the wolves." That shut them up for a second. Dana's gaze flicked to the herbs on the table. "Careful, Elira. It's not just wolves who bite. Sometimes it's the girls who smile the sweetest." With that, she turned on her heel, her dress swishing behind her like the tail of a spoiled fox. The others followed, giggling. Elira exhaled, finally letting her shoulders fall. "Why did she come here?" "To scare you," Scylla replied, "but fear only works if you believe them." Elira lifted the half-sewn dress, holding it against her chest. It wasn't regal, it wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had dyed the cloth herself with elderberries and crushed petals. The deep purple shimmered in the sunlight that filtered through the hut's window. "She's right," Elira said softly. "No one will dance with me." "Maybe not," Scylla said, "but you'll still be seen." That night, Elira worked late by candlelight, her limp a dull throb beneath her. She ignored the pain. She ignored the voices that echoed in her mind. She only listened to the whisper of the thread and the steady beat of her heart. When the candle finally burned out, she held up the dress, half finished, but full of defiance. Tomorrow, she would return to the forest to gather moonseed for the trim. She needed more, not just for the dress, but for herself. And as the wind howled softly outside the hut, carrying the scent of pine and frost, Elira whispered to the dark, "I'll go to the dance." She didn't know yet what that meant, only that something inside her had decided, and once a wolf decides to rise, nothing, not fear, not mockery, not even a limp, can hold her down. The moon festival descended upon Lurien village like a breathless prayer. As twilight swallowed the sky, torches were lit in a ring around the main square, casting flickering golden halos onto faces powdered, painted, and hopeful. Lanterns shaped like moons swayed gently in the crisp night air, their glow shimmering on fresh snow. Elira stood at the edge of it all, her breath catching in her throat. She wore the dress she'd finished only hours before, deep violet with silver thread along the sleeves, each stitch holding a piece of her defiance. Her limp was pronounced from the walk through the woods, but she held her head high. The square pulsed with music and motion. Girls twirled in perfect synchrony, their steps light as air. Their laughter floated like petals, but it wasn't meant to welcome. It was armor, sharp and glittering. "She actually came," someone whispered behind a hand. "She's limping worse than usual. She'll scare the Alpha back into the mountains." Elira didn't flinch. Her heart thudded, but she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. She walked past the snickering crowd, chin level, eyes steady. Somewhere deep inside her, a voice echoed, "You belong here." Then came the shift. The drums silenced. A ripple of silence swept through the square as hooves struck stone. The air thickened. Every head turned. The royal procession had arrived. 6 riders entered first, cloaked in black with silver sashes, their wolves walking beside them in eerie synchronicity. Then came him, Adric, the Alpha King. He sat atop a midnight stallion, taller than any man Elira had ever seen, his hair dark as ink and his eyes, those eyes, silver, cold, and cutting. His cloak billowed behind him like a storm. The villagers bowed low. Elira hesitated, unsure if she should kneel. Her leg wouldn't allow it easily. Before she could decide, his gaze swept the crowd and stopped on her. For a breathless second, the world fell away. Then the moment passed. He looked away, dismounted in one fluid motion, and disappeared into the heart of the crowd, flanked by his guards. Elira let out the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned to go, her chest tight. "Run away, Limp girl," Dana hissed near her ear. "You didn't even last 5 minutes." Elira clenched her jaw. "I came, that's more than you expected. Came to be pitied," Dana snorted. "You're not even in the contest. You're a shadow pretending to dance in the light." Elira stepped away, refusing to let the venom sink deeper, but her hands trembled. Music resumed. The feast began. Trays of roasted game and honeyed bread passed from hand to hand. Elira stood alone beneath a twisted elm tree, watching the swirl of celebration, the elegance, the performance, and then she saw him again. Adric stood near the high table, arms crossed, surveying the crowd with a predator's calm. He spoke little, nodded less. Women hovered nearby, giggling behind fans, but his eyes wandered the crowd as if searching for something not yet found. He didn't look at her again. Not that night. Still, Elira stayed, until the last drumbeat faded and the lanterns were taken down. She returned to Sila's hut in silence. "You went?" Sila said without looking up. "I did." "And?" "He saw me." Sila's hands stilled. Elira sat beside the fire, her dress wrinkled, her limp aching with every breath. "But I don't think I was what he expected," she whispered. The old woman stirred the coals. "Perhaps you were exactly what he needed to see." Outside, the moon hung heavy and full above the village, casting silver across the rooftops. Somewhere in the dark, a wolf howled, not distant but close. Watching. Waiting. The scent of firewood still lingered in Elira's hair the next morning. Her limbs ached, but it wasn't the limp that troubled her. It was the weight of being seen even for a breath. She couldn't shake the moment the Alpha King's eyes had found her in the crowd, not with pity, not with disgust, curiosity. The memory clung to her like morning mist. Down in the village, gossip spread like spilled ink. "They say the king asked about Dana." No, it was Mara. "He danced with her twice." "I heard he spoke to no one." Elira kept her head low as she walked past the bakery, her satchel empty, her hands clenched. The truth was, Aedric had not spoken. Not to her. Not to anyone in a way that mattered. But that glance. "You should have smiled when he looked," a voice called. Dana leaned against the well, her golden hair pinned into elaborate curls. 2 other girls stood with her as always. Elira paused. "Why would I smile at a man who sees only bodies to parade?" "Because one of those bodies might become queen," Dana replied sweetly. "And if that happens, I'll remember you said that." "You remember everything I say," Elira shot back. "It's flattering." Dana's smile twitched, brittle at the edges. "Just don't be surprised if the next time he looks your way it's with regret." Elira didn't answer. She turned and limped toward the forest path, the frost crunching beneath her boots. She didn't belong in their games, not in their small, sugar-dipped ambitions. The king had looked at her, yes, but it didn't mean she was part of their story. She had her own. The forest welcomed her like it always did, quiet and watchful. She walked beyond the usual trails deeper than she dared most days. Birds chirped overhead, and branches creaked like ancient whispers. Her satchel remained empty. She wasn't here for herbs. She just needed to breathe. "Most don't come this far alone," a voice said from behind. Elira froze. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, shadowed by trees. He wore a hooded cloak, black as pitch, dusted with pine needles. She couldn't see his face. "You're not Most," she replied, her voice steady. He stepped forward slowly, boots silent against the earth. As the hood fell back, the light caught silver eyes, familiar and far too clear. Elira's chest tightened. "Your Majesty." Adric's mouth curved, not a smile, but something like interest. "You noticed." "I was raised to notice the wolves in the woods," he tilted his head. "And are you afraid?" "Should I be?" There was a pause. Then he chuckled, low and unexpected. "Not unless you give me reason." She didn't move. "You followed me." "I walk often," he said. "Solitude is rare when you wear a crown. You should try limping. People leave you alone just fine." Adric's eyes narrowed, but not in offense. "You speak boldly for someone who was mocked last night." "I speak boldly because they think I can't." He took another step. "And what do you think?" Elira met his gaze. "I think they spend so much time learning to be chosen, they forget how to be worthy." The silence that followed felt like a thread pulled too tight. The wind stirred between them, cold and clean. Finally, Eadric said, "What's your name?" "Elira." "Elira," he repeated, tasting the syllables. "You walk with pain." "I live with it." He studied her, then nodded once. "Good." And just like that, he turned and walked away, vanishing into the trees. Elira stood still, heart pounding, unsure if she had just passed a test or been marked for something she didn't yet understand. But one thing was certain. The king hadn't forgotten her, and neither would she forget him. The dawn mist lay thick over the forest floor, curling around Elira's boots like silent ghosts. Birds had not yet begun their morning songs. The world was still sleeping, but she was not. She moved through the undergrowth with quiet purpose, guided more by instinct than memory. Her limp was sharper today. Last night's walk had left a stubborn ache, but it didn't slow her. Something inside pulled her deeper. Scylla had warned her not to stray past the old stone boundary, but Elira didn't care. She needed distance, from Dana, from whispers, from the king's eyes that still haunted her thoughts. She crossed the stream behind the Foxglove Glen and entered the deeper woods, where even the bravest children never dared go. Here, the trees grew ancient and wide, their trunks twisted with moss and time. The silence was different, not peaceful, watchful. That's when she heard it. A sharp, ragged breath, a soft whimper, low and feral. Elira froze. A clearing opened ahead, lit by a shaft of pale gold sunlight, and there, tangled in a snare of silver wire and blood, was a wolf. Massive. Its coat was dark grey, streaked with ash, its eyes the colour of molten amber. Blood stained the snow beneath its paw. The trap cut deep, the metal glinting cruelly in the light. Elira's breath caught. She should have run, should have turned back. But the wolf didn't snarl, it didn't growl, it just stared at her, chest rising in pain, a low hum of suffering vibrating through the air. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered, stepping closer. The wolf's ears flicked, her fingers trembled as she knelt. The wire had curled tightly around the joint. She reached for her knife, the one she used to trim herbs. Slowly, carefully. "If you lunge, I won't survive," she murmured, more to herself than to the creature. The wolf blinked. She cut the first strand, then another. The wire bit her palm, drawing blood, but she didn't stop. She worked until the final thread snapped with a soft metallic whine. The wolf jerked, then stilled. For a breathless moment, Elira waited. Then the beast rose. It staggered to its feet, powerful, proud, and bleeding, but it didn't run. It looked at her, gaze sharp as a blade. Something in those eyes was more than animal. "You'll live," she said quietly, "but stay out of snares." The wolf's head tilted slightly as if in answer. Then it turned and vanished into the trees. Elira exhaled hard and sat back, her hands shaking, her heart thunderous. A faint smear of her blood stained the snow where she'd knelt. "What in the gods' names was that?" she breathed. She didn't expect an answer, but part of her knew, deep in her bones, that this wasn't just a forest wolf. Back at the village, few would believe her. Most would call it foolishness or lies. But the truth clung to her skin like smoke. She had saved something powerful, something watching. As she made her way back toward the village, the sun began to rise, casting golden light across the frost-covered trees. The wind whispered through the branches, not with cold this time, but with something warmer, protective, ancient, a presence. Elira touched the wound in her palm, wrapped it with a strip of linen and glanced over her shoulder one last time. The forest didn't feel empty. and neither did she. The howl came before the messenger. High in the tower of the northern lodge, Aedric stood alone, eyes fixed on the treetops that rippled beneath the morning sun. He'd sensed it long before the report reached him, something shifting in the forest, something unexpected. The door creaked open. "My king," said Commander Hearth, bowing. "Word from the scouts. One of our sentinels, Cale, was found wounded near the southern snare lines. Trap wound. Said he was freed by a girl." Aedric turned slowly. "A girl?" Hearth nodded. "He said she approached without fear. Released him, bled for him. Name? She didn't give it, but he said she walked with a limp." Aedric's jaw tensed. The girl from the village, the one who wore defiance in her eyes and shame on her steps. "Where is Cale now?" "He's recovering in the lower wing. Wouldn't shift back. Too weak." Aedric said nothing. He moved to the long window, hands clasped behind his back. Below, the village bustled with post-festival routine, no longer pretending, just surviving. The people always revealed themselves after the celebration ended. "Send word to the blacksmith's daughter," Aedric said. "Have her gather the others." "For what purpose?" Aedric's eyes narrowed. "A hunt. I want to see who dares track in my forest now." Hearth bowed again and left. But Aedric had no interest in hunters today. He had another path to walk. Elira was gathering mushrooms when the voice came from behind her. "Careful. Some of those are deadly." She stiffened. Aedric stepped from the shadows, his cloak pulled back. No guards in sight. His presence felt like gravity, inevitable, consuming. She didn't stand. "You followed me again." "I'm curious," he said simply. "About what?" "How someone with such fragile steps moves through a forest like she was born of it." She kept picking. "Maybe I was." "Maybe," he echoed, kneeling across from her. "You found one of mine." Her fingers paused on a mossy root. "He was dying. You saved him. He would have done the same for me, wouldn't he?" Aedric smiled faintly. "No, he wouldn't have." She looked up. Their eyes met, and something flared, sharp and ancient. "I don't know what you expect from me," she said. "Nothing. That's why I came." She studied him. "And what did you find?" "A girl who shouldn't be ignored." Elira scoffed. "You're wrong. I've been ignored all my life. I've learned to expect it." "Then why free a dying wolf?" "Because I knew what it felt like to be trapped. To bleed and still be judged weak." Aedric's voice lowered. "You're not weak." Elira stood. Her limp was pronounced from kneeling too long, but she didn't hide it. "Everyone says I am, including the people you bowed to 2 nights ago." "I bowed to no one," he said. She turned to leave. "You have a fire in you," Aedric said behind her. "It burns through pain. Through fear." "Fire burns everything," she replied without looking back, "even the ones who carry it." And with that, she disappeared into the trees. Aedric remained still, watching the place where she vanished. Something stirred in him, not just interest, recognition. The scent hit her first, sharp, sweet, familiar in a way that made her heart race, though she couldn't place it. Elira froze mid-step, the basket in her hand tilting slightly as she looked around the glade. The morning fog clung low to the ground, curling around stones and tree roots like it had secrets to tell. She had come to gather moonseed as promised to Scylla, but something else had drawn her to this clearing. A tug in her chest, a whisper just beyond thought. Then she saw them. Moonflowers. Dozens of them. They bloomed where no one had ever seen them before, silver petals unfolding under sunlight, as if answering a call only they could hear. Elira dropped to her knees, breath caught in her throat. "I've never seen them grow this far north," she whispered. Her fingers hovered over the petals. The scent was intoxicating, not just sweet but rich, almost feral. She leaned in and it hit her again. Warmth, pine, smoke, and the faintest trace of something masculine. Her vision blurred for a moment, then steadied. "Elira." She jerked upright at the sound of her name. Adric stood at the edge of the clearing, arms folded across his chest, eyes like molten silver. "How do you do that?" she asked, startled. "Do what? Find me. I don't." "You draw me." She bristled at the suggestion. "I didn't ask to be followed." "No," he admitted. "But the forest did." She rose slowly, her limp stiff today. "You're speaking in riddles again." "I'm speaking in truths you've yet to understand." She narrowed her eyes. "Then say it plainly." He stepped closer, the earth silent beneath his boots. "Do you smell it?" She nodded slowly. "It's like fire and flowers." "That's not how others would describe it," she frowned. "Then why do I smell it that way?" "Because your senses are shifting." "I'm not—" She hesitated, her throat tightening. "I'm not like you. You bled for one of my wolves. You walk the woods without fear. You smell the scent of bond before the bond is offered." She blinked. "Bond?" He studied her. "There's more wolf in you than you've been told." Her breath caught. "No," she said quietly. "I would know." "Would you?" Adric's tone softened. "Some truths sleep inside us until we suffer enough to wake them." "I'm not one of you," she repeated. "I was born wrong. My leg—" "Is marked," he interrupted. "Not broken." She faltered. The wind stirred between them, lifting her hair, carrying the moonflower scent with it. Something primal stirred in her chest, like a note from a song she didn't remember learning. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You will," he said. "When the moon calls, you'll answer." Elira looked down at the flowers, at the silver roots curling through black soil, and back at him. "Why me?" "Because you're more than they see," he said, "and maybe more than you've let yourself become." She swallowed hard. "I'm scared." "So was I," he admitted, "before I turned." She met his eyes. "I don't want to change into something I don't recognize." "You won't," Adric said. "You'll become what you were meant to be." The forest pulsed with stillness. And in that quiet, something ancient inside Elira shifted, not painfully, not violently, but like a door creaking open. She didn't step through. Not yet. But she didn't close it either. The fire crackled low in Sila's hearth, casting a warm amber light over the stone floor. Elira sat silently on the woven rug, her hands curled tightly around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The scent of moonflowers still clung faintly to her cloak, refusing to fade even after hours away from the glade. Sila watched her from across the room, her eyes sharp, knowing. "You've seen him again," the old woman said. Elira didn't answer. "You've smelled it," Sila added, "haven't you?" Elira's throat tightened. "I thought it was just the flowers." "Moonflowers don't bloom in that clearing, Elira. Not naturally. That scent, what you feel when it hits you, it's not flowers. It's your blood remembering something your mind's been taught to forget." Elira's gaze flicked to the fire. "He said I'm not just human." Sila set down her spoon. "He's not wrong." The silence stretched thick, broken only by the pop of the burning wood. "My leg," Elira murmured, voice distant. "All my life I thought it was a flaw, a punishment." Sila shook her head. "It's a birthmark." Elira looked up sharply. "A mark of the Vigyas, the Moon Watchers," Sila said. "A lineage long thought extinct." "You're saying I come from a wolf bloodline?" Elira asked, disbelief cracking her voice. Sila nodded once. "Not just any bloodline. The Vigyas were not warriors. They were seers, guides. They could smell lies, feel truth in bones, walk between dreams. When your mother came to Lurien, she was already carrying you, wounded, hunted, but still holding on. She never told us who she truly was, but I knew." Elira gripped the cup tighter. "And you never said anything?" "You were just a child when she died," Sila said gently. "There were already whispers. You were limping, weak, they said. Different. If they had known what you really were, they would have killed me." "Yes." Elira stood abruptly, pacing, her limp more pronounced with each step. "So what am I now, some half-wolf mystery no one wants to claim?" You're exactly what you were always meant to be, Sila said, standing with effort. And now the blood is waking. The king knows it. So do his wolves. Elira turned, breathing hard. Why now? Why not before? Because pain awakens truth, and you've suffered long enough. Tears welled in Elira's eyes, unbidden. I didn't ask for this. No one ever does, Sila whispered. But it's not a curse. It's a calling. Elira sank back to the floor, her whole body trembling. What do I do? Sila knelt beside her and took her hands. You walk the path. You accept what's inside. You learn what it means to be more than what they told you. Elira's voice cracked. I'm scared. Sila smiled softly. Good. That means you'll walk carefully. Outside, the wind howled low and mournful, brushing against the wooden walls like fingers on a drum. The forest seemed to breathe in rhythm with her heart. You need to prepare, Sila said. He'll return, and when he does, he won't come just to talk. Elira looked into the fire, the flames dancing like stories not yet told. The truth of her bloodline wasn't just history, it was a key, a reckoning. And she wasn't ready. Not yet. But she would be. Smoke curled from the hall's chimney, but it wasn't the comforting kind from hearth fires or roasted meat. It was heavier, bitter. Rumors burned faster than flames ever could, and today they scorched everything Elira touched. They're saying you carry a traitor's blood, whispered Mara as Elira passed through the market square, that your mother was a rogue, a cursed wolf who fled the southern packs. Elira didn't stop walking. Children pointed. Elders turned their backs. She felt it in every step, eyes like knives, silence loud enough to crush. By the time she reached Sila's hut, her hands were shaking. They know, she said before the door had fully closed. Sila's face hardened. Dana? Who else? Elira's voice was low. She must have overheard us, or followed me. She knew exactly what to say. Now they look at me like I'm a disease. You're not, Sila said firmly. You're a reckoning. That doesn't make it safer. A knock thundered at the door. Sila opened it to find 2 armored guards, their silver crests glinting. Between them stood a royal envoy, wrapped in a crimson cloak. The king requests Elira's presence, now. Sila stepped in front of Elira. She's not ready. I'll go, Elira said. The ride to the hall was silent, tense. The guards didn't look at her, and she didn't ask why. Inside, the village's high council had gathered. Elders, lords, Dana standing smug at her father's side, and at the center, seated on the carved stone throne, was Aedric. His expression was unreadable. Elira stepped into the circle. Her limp echoed off the walls like a drumbeat. Dana smirked. She's a danger to the village. If she's half wolf, half traitor, what happens when the blood rises? She could turn on us. She's hiding powers, dangerous ones. She's not like the rest of us. The voices overlapped until Aedric raised his hand. Silence. He rose from his seat slowly. You speak of blood as though it writes destiny. But I know plenty of full-blooded men who are more beast than wolf. He descended the steps toward Elira, stopping just inches away. She bled for one of my sentinels. She healed him. Without her, Kale would be dead. A pause. She is not a threat. She is under my protection. Gasps echoed through the hall. Dana's eyes widened, her voice shrill. You would protect her? Over your own counsel. Yes, Aedric said, never looking away from Elira. Because unlike many here, she has proven loyalty without being asked. Elira's breath caught. Dana stepped forward, face red with fury. She's manipulating you, playing the cripple while worming her way into the court. Aedric turned to her, cold as steel. Enough! Enough! Dana flinched. I came here as guest to this village, Aedric said, but as king I do not tolerate cruelty, nor cowardice masquerading as tradition. From this day forward, Elira of Lurien is bound to the protection of the crown. He looked back at Elira. You're leaving this place. Elira's voice trembled. To where? To the northern fortress, he said. "You'll be safe there, and trained." Her heart raced. "Trained for what?" Adric's eyes glinted. "For what you're becoming." He offered her his hand. Behind them, the hall was silent. No more whispers, just firelight, flickering across the stone, and the quiet breath of something inevitable. Elira took his hand, and the doors behind them closed. The northern fortress loomed like a shadow carved from the mountain itself, cold, silent, and indifferent. Elira's breath misted in the air as she stepped from the carriage, the weight of newness pressing on her chest. Snow crunched beneath her boots, and the wind cut through her cloak like it knew she didn't belong. Adric had left her at the gates without a word. "You'll find your place," he'd said, "or make one." Inside the fortress walls, warriors trained in the open courtyard. Their movements were brutal, efficient, nothing like the soft elegance of village dances. Steel clashed, wolves growled, blood stained the snow. The Moonblades, they were the elite, shifters born of silver lineage, trained to defend the Alpha and his lands. They didn't look at her when she passed, or if they did, it was with thinly veiled contempt. She was a crippled girl in a place where strength was worshipped. Master Corrin met her by the training ring. His face was hard and weathered, his arms crossed like iron gates. "Name?" "Elira." He looked her over. "You're the half-blood." She stiffened. "Is that what they're calling me?" "They'll call you worse." "Let them." He smirked. "Good." Her days began before the sun rose and ended after the moon had climbed high. At first she couldn't keep up. Her legs screamed with every lunge, every fall. She bled often. Her palms blistered from sword hilts, her knees bruised from the icy stone. The others, mostly men, all wolves, ignored her, except for one, Torrin. He was massive, with a scar that split his brow and a voice like gravel. The first time she fell during a run, he barked, "Try harder, cripple." She looked up from the snow. "You afraid I'll outrun you?" Laughter followed her for days, but she never stopped. She listened, learned, adapted. When she couldn't match their strength, she used speed. When her limp dragged her down, she found balance through instinct. Her senses sharpened, smelling adrenaline, tasting anger in the air. Her body began to remember things she never learned. One night, weeks into her training, Master Corrin called her forward. "Shift." She froze. "I can't." "You can. You will." "I don't know how." Corrin's voice dropped. "Then feel." She closed her eyes. The courtyard went silent. Her blood surged. Her breath deepened. The moon was full above, its light a silver drumbeat on her skin. Something inside her moved. Her bones ached, not from pain, but pressure. Her fingers curled into claws. Her vision blurred, edges sharpening. She gasped, and then it was gone. A near shift, not complete, but enough for the air to go still. Torrin stared at her, no longer laughing. Corrin nodded once. "Tomorrow again." Elira staggered back to her quarters that night, her body on fire with exhaustion, but her chest, her heart, felt light. Scylla had been right. She wasn't weak, she was just unclaimed. Now she was beginning to claim herself. And if the Moonblades still doubted her, they would learn what the wolves of Lurien never did, that sometimes the ones who fall the hardest rise higher than anyone dares expect. The snowfall had thickened overnight, blanketing the northern fortress in silence. Elira stood at the edge of the training ring, her breath rising in clouds, her fingers raw and aching. The cold no longer numbed her. It clarified. Torrin circled her, wooden blades in hand. "Let's see if the half-blood can bite today." "Try not to cry when I do," Elira muttered, raising her own blade. They moved. Torrin was fast, brute strength behind every swing. But Elira had learned his rhythm, the way his foot dragged slightly before a feint, the brief twitch of his wrist before a lunge. She dodged once, twice, then struck hard across his side. He grunted, stumbling. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The Moonblades watching from the sidelines didn't laugh this time. They were beginning to see her. But then it happened. A spark. Not pain, power. It rippled through her skin, crawling up her spine, setting her blood ablaze. She dropped her blade, gasping, as heat surged beneath her ribs. "Elira!" Corin's voice boomed. "Shift control, now!" She fell to her knees, her fingers contorted, claws threatening to push through. Her jaw ached, her eyes blurred. For a heartbeat, she felt her bones trying to bend, her heart matching a rhythm not human. Adric appeared from the shadows, walking with purpose. "Don't stop it," he said quietly. "Let it come." "I can't control it," she choked out. "You're not supposed to. Not yet. Just feel it." She trembled. Then something inside snapped. Not painfully, but clean, like glass breaking to reveal a blade beneath. A mark ignited on her leg, burning through her skin like moonlight etched in blood, shaped like a crescent, framed by ancient runes. It pulsed once, then settled. The pain vanished. Silence stretched. She looked up, chest heaving. Adric stared at the mark, his expression unreadable. "The sigil of the Vigius," Corin whispered. "I thought it was legend." Torrin muttered. "She's one of the old line?" Elira blinked, still shaking. "What does it mean?" Adric met her gaze. "It means you were born for more than this ring. That mark hasn't been seen in 3 generations. It belonged to those who led the old packs, not through power, but through vision." "But I'm not a leader," she said. "I can barely hold a blade." Adric stepped closer. "Leaders aren't forged in perfect bodies. They rise through fire, and you've burned longer than any of them." Her voice faltered. "Why now?" "Because your blood recognizes this place, this power." And it finally stopped waiting for permission. The mark glowed faintly beneath the fabric of her trousers, a quiet reminder of everything she never knew she carried. Torrin stepped forward, slower this time. He didn't offer a joke, only a nod. "Respect," he said simply. Elira stared at him, then back at the others. No more snickers, no sneers. Recognition. Corin looked to Adric. "She's ready for the next phase." "Not yet," Adric replied. "One test remains." Elira straightened. "What test?" He didn't answer, but deep in her bones she felt it, like a storm building at the edge of the sky. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The moon hung low and swollen, casting pale fire over the snow-covered fortress. The final night of the lunar convergence had come. Elira stood before her chamber mirror, the violet ceremonial tunic clinging to her skin like second breath. The sigil on her leg burned softly beneath the cloth, reminding her that tonight everything would change. A knock. She turned to see Lyra, one of the court stewards, standing in the doorway. "They're waiting. You're to walk before the council when the bell tolls." Elira nodded. Her throat was dry, but her hands were steady. In the great hall, banners of silver and midnight blue fluttered from the rafters. Candles glowed in glass spheres floating above the gathering of nobles and warriors. The moonblades stood in formation. Adric stood before the crescent dais, regal in his black and silver armor, watching the entrance. She walked in alone. Every step echoed. She didn't hide her limp, didn't shrink from their stares. She owned it now. As she reached the dais, the murmurs began, quiet, sharp, accusatory. "She bears the mark. Is she truly of the bloodline? She's untrained. This is a risk." Adric raised a hand. Silence fell. "Tonight, the council bears witness to a soul born of 2 worlds, flesh and fire, wolf and woman. She carries the sigil of the Vigias, the first in 3 generations." He turned to Elira. "Do you come before us willingly?" "I do," she said clearly. "Do you recognize the power in your blood?" "I do." "Will you wield it in protection, not pride?" "I will." As the council began to recite the rite, a sudden clang echoed from the gallery. Gasps followed. "Dana." She stepped from the shadows in a sleek, glimmering gown, her eyes cold and triumphant. "I object." Adric narrowed his gaze. "You have no standing here." "I have truth," Dana said. "She's not one of us." She's a half-blood child of a rogue, and she's been lying from the start. Elira's heart pounded. I never lied. You let them think you were harmless, broken. You manipulated the king. Adric stepped forward. Watch your tongue. But Dana wasn't finished. And I have proof she's still hiding something. Look. She produced a small vial, holding it high. Moonroot, poison, taken from her quarters this morning. Elira stared, stunned. What? She planned to use it tonight. On you, on herself. Who knows? Dana shrugged. Wolves don't change. Not really, a murmur swept the hall. I never touched that, Elira said. I would never. But the council looked uncertain now. Doubt moved like frost over a pond. Then Adric spoke, quiet but thunderous. You found this in her room. My steward did. I don't believe you. She's deceived us all. No, he said. You have. His hand snapped out. Bring the steward. Guards moved swiftly. Moments later, a trembling young girl was dragged forward. Adric's voice was ice. Did she make you plant it? The girl burst into tears. I didn't want to. She said she'd have me whipped if I didn't. Gasps turned into growls. The Moonblades stepped forward, fury clear on their faces. Dana's composure shattered. Lies. You believe her over me? I believe actions, Adric said. And yours end here. Wait. Take her, he ordered. As the guards seized her, she screamed curses, but they faded quickly as the doors closed behind her. Silence returned. Adric looked back at Elira. You stood in the fire and didn't burn. Her voice cracked. I almost did. But you didn't. He extended his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. Their fingers touched. And the moon outside surged brighter, like it too had been waiting. The wind rolled down from the high peaks, laced with moonlight and old magic. The festival ground within the fortress courtyard had been transformed. Lanterns shaped like wolves floated above the crowd, casting silver light on the stones. Music pulsed soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat waiting to rise. Elira stood just beyond the arched entrance, heart pounding, dress flowing around her ankles. The garment shimmered like dusk, deep violet, stitched with threads of silver and blue, every seam a quiet declaration. I am not less. The sigil on her leg still glowed faintly beneath the fabric. Inside, whispers began. She came. She's limping again. Why would she show herself now? But they didn't matter. She stepped into the light. The music faltered. All eyes turned. Her steps were uneven, her gait marked, but she walked with pride. Her shoulders back, her chin high. She didn't hide from them. She owned the limp, the mark, the silence that swallowed their laughter. On the dais Adric stood, eyes locked on her as if she were the only person there. His expression gave nothing away, but his gaze burned. At the center of the courtyard, the musicians hesitated. The crowd parted. A ring opened in the center, where the Alpha King traditionally led the first dance. A moment passed. Then Adric stepped forward. Gasps echoed. He descended the stairs, every movement sure and deliberate. He didn't bow, he didn't speak. He simply walked until he stood before her, towering, regal, a storm cloaked in velvet and steel. He extended his hand. Elira, he said, low enough that only she could hear. Dance with me. Her mouth was dry, her legs trembled, but she reached out and took his hand. The music began again, slow, mournful, with the weight of something eternal. They moved, not with perfection, not with grace, but with power. Each step was deliberate. Her foot dragged, but it didn't falter. He matched her pace, never leading too far ahead. They spun in a slow circle, the moonlight catching the threads in her dress like stars. No one spoke. No one dared. This wasn't a performance. It was a coronation of spirit. She was the girl they'd laughed at, the one they'd called weak, the one they tried to erase. And yet here she was, dancing with the Alpha King beneath the moon they all worshipped. Adric's voice found her again, soft and certain. Let them see. I am, she whispered. Around them the whispers changed. She moves like she belongs here. She's not limping, she's leading. She's radiant. The final note lingered, and Adric drew her close, bowing his head until their foreheads nearly touched. You've claimed your place, he murmured, and no one can take it from you. I didn't come to be chosen, she said. I know, he replied. But I choose you anyway. He pulled back slowly and turned to face the crowd. Let it be known, he declared, his voice carrying to every stone and shadow. She, born with the blood of the Vigias, the mark of the moon, and the courage to stand when others fell, she is no longer outsider, no longer forgotten. He looked at her. She is my equal. The courtyard erupted, not in protest, in thunderous, awed silence. And then, as if the mountain itself approved, the wolves in the forest howled, long, low, reverent. Elira stood in the center of it all, scarred, limping, imperfect, and utterly unshakable. She had become legend. The moon had begun its descent, casting pale rays over the fortress like a fading blessing. The dance was over, but the hall had not emptied. Elira stood by the arched window of the throne room, watching the stars fade as dawn crept across the mountains. Behind her, murmurs rose among the council. She's untested. She's too young. She's not even fully shifted. She was chosen by the moon, Corin said, silencing them, and by the king. Adric's voice rang across the chamber. I did not choose her because she's perfect. I chose her because she's true. Elira turned as he stepped forward, calm and certain. She has faced more than most of you have in your entire lives, he said, looking each elder in the eye. And she never once asked for a title or power. She only ever asked to be seen. A pause. And I saw her. Elira stepped forward, heart steady despite the fire in her veins. I don't want to be a symbol, she said. I don't want to be your exception or your excuse. The council watched her in uneasy silence. I want to lead with purpose, she continued, but not under rules built to keep others like me out. Adric's brow lifted slightly. I will stand at your side, Elira said, voice rising, but I won't be silent. If you name me your queen, then I will not rule in tradition's shadow. I will speak for those still waiting outside the walls, for the ones whose strength doesn't roar, but whispers. A silence fell that felt heavier than any outburst. One elder stood. Lady Brenna, oldest of them all, her silver braid long and her eyes sharp. Then speak, she said. And let the realm listen. Adric stepped beside Elira, their hands brushing. I name her not just queen, he declared, but voice of the new moon. Let her judgment shape our future. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Others resisted still, but they did not speak. A choice had been made. Later, in the quiet of the high tower, Adric stood beside her as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. You didn't have to challenge them, he said softly. Yes, I did, he smiled. And you will again. Elira exhaled. They'll resist me. They resisted me too. I'm not like you. No, he said, brushing his fingers against the fabric above her sigil. You're something older. Something the world forgot it needed. She didn't answer, but she didn't step back either. You'll make 1,000 enemies, he warned. And 10,000 followers, she replied. He chuckled under his breath. You're going to change everything, aren't you? I already have. They stood in silence a moment longer. Below, the fortress stirred, a new day rising. One born not of dominance, but of balance. I never imagined it like this, Elira whispered. Becoming queen. He looked at her. How did you imagine it? I didn't. Then let's write a version no one expects. Adric reached for her hand again, and this time it wasn't an invitation, it was a promise. The wind was soft that morning, brushing over the fortress walls like a lullaby at the end of a long battle. The skies had cleared, casting a golden hue across the mountains. The people gathered below the high balcony, eyes turned upward, breaths held in unity. Elira stood behind the arched stone, heart steady, gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. Some she recognized from the village, some from the court. Others were strangers, humans and wolves alike, drawn by word of what had come to pass. She wore a crown not of gold, but silver branches entwined with obsidian thorns, symbol of the Vigyas reborn. Behind her, the council waited in solemn silence. Adric stood just to her right, regal in posture but quiet, allowing her the moment. He had always understood when to step forward and when to let her rise. Elira stepped to the edge. "I was not raised in a palace," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I was not trained for power or groomed for royalty. I was raised to believe I was broken." A murmur passed through the crowd. "I limped through your streets. I listened to your laughter. I endured the silence you gave me, thinking it kindness. But I was not weak, I was waiting." Her gaze found those who once turned their backs, not in vengeance, but truth. "You taught me how to survive, and now I will teach you how to change." The wind caught her cloak, and for a moment it billowed behind her like wings. This realm belongs not to the loudest nor the strongest, but to those who endure, who listen, who rise. Adric stepped forward then, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The crown is not just mine," he said. "It is hers, and through her it becomes something new." The crowd erupted, not in polite applause but howls, long and full-throated, a chorus of wolves and humans alike. From the forest the howl was answered, distant, powerful, ancient. Elira turned to Adric. "Do you hear it?" He nodded. "They accept you." "No," she said softly, her eyes glinting. "They remember me." The Moonblades dropped to one knee. The council bowed. Even Torrin, scarred and unyielding, lowered his head. Elira stepped back, her chest rising with each breath. "I will not promise ease," she said, "but I promise fairness. I will not offer mercy for cruelty, but I will offer justice, and for the broken, the discarded, the forgotten, I will be your voice." She raised her hand. The people rose to their feet. She did not roar. She didn't need to. Later, in the private stillness of the tower, she stood at the window once more, watching the moon rise as the last light of day slipped away. "Queen of the Moonscar," Adric said behind her. "It suits you." "I thought I would feel heavier," she murmured. "But I don't. That's because the weight was always there. Now you carry it with purpose." She turned, facing him fully. "What now?" He smiled. "Now we begin." They stood in silence, two rulers forged not by destiny but by choice. Below, the kingdom pulsed with life, stories waiting to be written in the language of change. And Elira, the girl they mocked, the woman they doubted, stood crowned not only by silver, but by fire. If Elira's journey moved you, don't forget to subscribe and join the pack for more stories of strength, transformation, and the power of choosing your own path. Your next tale waits. Click the video on screen to keep howling with us.